Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Through the Monocle, where today we will be discussing the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Through the Monocle. I'm your host today, Grant Skillen, and joining me after surviving the year-long trip cross country to Seattle, it's Grant Ingram. How
How
are you
you
doing?
doing? I'm doing all right. I'm a little tired, not gonna lie. The 38-hour drive was a pain in the neck, but I'm
Yeah,
here now. I'm set up. I actually have a background. It's pretty cool.
yeah, and he is back. But today I am hosting once again, and today, as you can tell by the title, we are discussing the sequel trilogy of Star Wars. So for everyone who hasn't been keeping up with our cycle, we are in Star Wars month. May the Fourth be with you. Was the catalyst for that. So we started with the original trilogy, then we went to the prequels, and now to the sequel. So we're following mostly what George Lucas had in mind. Except this isn't the story he had in mind, but
Exactly.
yep. Next week, hopefully you'll tune in if you like this episode. We'll be discussing the extra movies, so Rogue One, Solo, movies like that. We're excited to cover. Rogue One's a favorite of ours in
Those
particular.
are the two. There are no other
Yeah,
movies like that. There were supposed to
yeah,
be, but yeah,
yeah,
there aren't.
yeah. Rogue One in particular is our favorite, but we'll get to that next week. Today we are discussing the sequel trilogy, and oh boy, you're in for a good one, um,
We've already talked for about an
or a bad
hour
one.
off air to to then come in and continue talking here. So
Yeah,
these
and
movies
so
exist.
yeah, and for even more background on our other show, Much Talk About Nothing, please go check it out. We have a few episodes on Star Wars. I know we have at least like 2 or 3 episodes about the sequel trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
It has long been a debated topic between us, and yeah,
We seem to have mostly flipped sides, which is kind of weird. Um, so the sequels, the redheaded stepchild of Star Wars.
yeah.
Sorry for all of you redheaded stepchildren out there. No offense, but these movies suck, and so do you. No. Anyway, so these movies have no right to exist. They just don't.
Yeah,
At least not in
they
the form
they don't.
they do.
Yes, this is the classic Disney cash grab. George Lucas, so to give him some credit for this, when George Lucas sold Lucasfilm to Disney, George Lucas, along with all of Lucasfilm, gave his outline and his idea for the sequel trilogy.
Right.
Quick overview, because I watched a quick overview before this. Darth Maul would have taken over the galaxy as part of like a trade federation. He would have had an apprentice. Luke would have restarted the Jedi Order. Leia would have eventually become the whatchamacallit, like over the Galactic Senate, and it actually would have been revealed she was the chosen one and not Anakin.
The Chancellor.
Um, yeah, the Chancellor. So that was Lucas's original story, and if you've seen these movies, you can tell that's just slightly off of what we got. Um,
Mainly because Maul's been dead for what 40 years at this point, and also
no,
J.J. Abrams.
yep, and Ryan Johnson.
Eh,
Um,
less so Ryan Johnson, more J.J. Abrams.
both of them. They're in cohorts together. They're
Abrams should have stuck with Star Trek, and it's not Ryan Johnson's fault that they didn't follow Lucas's plan. That's on Abrams, 100%.
it. Yeah, I mean, it's just a whole mess. But
Oh yeah,
I think the one thing Grant and I can agree on is The Force Awakens is a pretty good movie.
it
Like
is. Yeah, it's
that
definitely
if
solid.
if Grant and I can agree on one thing, it is that. um
Where we differ is I feel that The Force Awakens is episode 4 all over again because
well, I
it
don't disagree with
literally
that, but
is.
I don't think that's a bad thing
It,
personally.
it just isn't anything we haven't seen. It's like if I wanted to do that, I'd watch the superior version of it from 30 years prior.
I mean, that's an argument, but you could also say in doing that, they went for a safer option in the first movie and went for something they knew people would enjoy. And then with The Last Jedi, they went, you know what? Let's just
Airball it. Um,
airball it.
I will say, as far as the safer option goes, I think the safest option was just to do Lucas's idea. Like, love it or
Well,
hate it, it's Lucas.
yeah,
Um,
and people both love and hate Lucas, so, um, it would have fit perfectly,
right.
but so in Force Awakens, I think it's we can agree it's a solid movie, and it ends and it sets up the next movie and sets up the rest of the trilogy.
Right.
So, Force Awakens, you get introduced to Rey, get introduced to really everyone: Snoke, Kylo, Finn, Poe, the Resistance as it is now,
I,
and you
for
get
the sake
yes,
of later, I want to mention that we get introduced to Finn as a former stormtrooper who is, without a doubt, force sensitive and wields a
yes,
lightsaber. Just
yes,
for sake of argument later.
yeah. And we go through the movie, Han gets killed, rip our boy. Finn is able to somewhat fight off Kylo, so is Rey. Um, although I would say more successfully. But you get stuff to go off of. They're able to get the plans. They get the plans to go find Luke. They get the plans for the Death Star. Um,
They
and
blow up
then
another Death Star.
yeah, and then they go and they find Luke, and Ray is standing there with this cool cinematic shot. Ray is going to hand him the lightsaber. Luke standing there like, "Yes, it's back. It's Star Wars." And then you get to the beginning of 8. And
Yeah.
that's where the controversy, begins.
I do want to point out that seven was liked. I don't know that seven
Mhm.
was necessarily beloved by the fans. Because I believe around seven is when Disney started calling out the fans for being toxic, which
I
is
think so.
code for we gave you a movie you didn't want and you didn't like it.
Yeah. So the Force Awakens, on Rotten Tomatoes has a 93% tomato meter, which is the highest of the tomato meter scores, and the audience score is the 85%, which is actually the second highest in the sequel trilogy, which is very interesting because the one that's
Behind
higher
what?
than it is Rise of Skywalker. It's at 86. It's
Okay,
just barely there, but Rise of Skywalker has a higher audience rating than The Force Awakens.
but that was like almost universally hated. So it must have been a general audience
Rise of
thing.
Skywalker was not universally hated. Last Jedi was universally hated, and people loved Rise of Skywalker in that it undid a lot of the stuff they didn't like in The Last Jedi.
The thing is, Last Jedi wasn't universally hated. Last Jedi was a split. It was the Man of Steel of this trilogy. It was a solid 50-50. Whereas Rise of
40,
Skywalker,
60.
well,
If
Rise
you
of
look at Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 42%
it got review
audience
bombed.
score.
You can't judge it on the audience score on that. It got review bombed. What's
I
weird
mean, it
though,
did, but also I would say generally the reaction to that movie was the worst of any of the movies because everyone had, and we were talking about this bit before, with the comics and with everything like you were mentioning, that gave everyone a sense of what to expect from Luke and Leia and Han and everyone, especially Luke. And then it goes, well, guess what, Kobe.
yeah, airball.
Yeah.
But where I'm going with this is that Last Jedi did get review bombed, so you can't judge the audience score on that. I think that general audiences liked Rise more.
Hmm.
I think that Star Wars fans were split on at the very least on the last or on Rise, whereas they were sort of split, but like general audiences were also okay with Last Jedi. So like
I don't
I don't
I feel like it's the opposite. I feel like they just absolutely did not like The Last Jedi. I know definitely didn't like it leaving theaters. I know my family didn't. And then, like, Rise, I think I remember that being the general reaction was, "What the heck is this?" Mark Hamill even. We can get into that a bit too, but Mark Hamill was even like, "What is this crap?" Basically.
you're talking about with
Um,
Rise.
no, with Last Jedi.
Yeah, he felt like he was playing a different character.
Yeah, he did. And that's not good if the guy that's coming back to play Luke doesn't feel like he's playing Luke.
You're
Um,
right, but that said, there is a story leading into that.
oh, there certainly is, but that's also our title. Having no plan somehow is somehow worse than having a bad one. The fact they didn't have a plan meant what did Mark Hamill know when he signed up? Because if he knew that he was signing up for the Luke that we got is sounds like he probably wouldn't have signed up for it, or he would have had a different reaction because once he figured out where the character was going, you could see him throwing in hints and then straight up just saying like, "What the heck is this? What is
Yeah,
this character I'm playing?" Like if there was a plan, he would have known it and went, "Oh, okay, this happened and this happened and that's how Luke got here." But instead,
right,
he's just you make the actor mad and that makes the fans mad.
right. I have yet to actually say what I'm trying to say, but I think you're sort of getting it. Where I was going with that was that they both kind of split the base. Even the but when you look at the Rotten Tomatoes audience score, you see one that had a general audience come up behind it in Rise of Skywalker
Mhm.
that still got hit pretty hard by Star Wars fans. And then you also have The Last Jedi, which didn't get the general audience outcry that popped Rise of Skywalker up. I think it was more of a split, is where I'm going with that. Anyway, we can move on now. I just had to make sure I tried to say the words I was trying to say.
Yeah. No, you're
Podcasting,
you're
guys.
good. Um, so yeah, Force Awakens is solid. We agree on that. If we
Mm-hmm.
want to, we can get into some of the particulars on Last Jedi because when you look at the Last Jedi, so I mentioned Force Awakens had a 93% tomato meter and an 85 audience. It's a little off, but it shows that generally critics really liked it, and so did the fans. Um, and I think that's a fair assessment. Even from when it came out, it's like yeah, maybe a little bit of what we've had before, but it's nothing egregious.
Yeah.
Then you get to The Last Jedi, and I mentioned it a little bit ago. So the audience score is 42%.
Right.
Rating like bombed or what? That's bad. That's really bad. The tomato meter is 91%.
Right.
That is a almost 50-point difference between what the critics see and what the audience sees.
Right. Because the critic number is verifiable. It,
Yeah.
it's it's more based on the movie as a movie, unless it's a Star Wars movie. And then in addition, they didn't review bomb it. Like review bombing is where you just flood it with thousands of reviews to tank the score. Like
Mhm.
you would have to then do the exact opposite to get it back normal. So you
Mhm.
can't. My point is the 50 spread divide. I remember when I went and saw it, it was a certified fresh at 90. And then I believe it was like an 82 audience score.
Is there a way to see the history of the audience score?
I'll see if I can track it down. You anyway, you keep talking. Let me see if I
Um,
can find it.
let's see. I'm trying to look, but yeah, so a lot of what The Last Jedi did was and what made fans not like it as much was just some of the creative decisions that Ryan Johnson and Lucasfilm went with. And the obvious one of what I mentioned earlier is what they did with the character of Luke, because you already had a lot of the other characters established. Like Han's already dead. You've already seen Leia. You've seen Rey. They screw up Finn. That's another thing that people didn't like. And you have Poe. But the huge difference is what they do with the character of Luke in this movie. And the fan reaction, and even like I mentioned, Mark Hamill's reaction was not good because you see Luke in the original trilogy and he's being trained by Yoda, and you eventually get the six, and you go, okay, he's got a decision to make. Is he going to turn and submit to the Emperor, kill him, and take over and turn to the dark side, or is he going to do what he ultimately did and stay good? And then he's able to redeem his father and kill the Emperor. Um, to save the galaxy from him and bring balance. And so that's what he does. And then I mentioned earlier, and they bring back comics, or they make the comics after. So you get to see the adventures of Luke and Leia and everyone and what they do. And so that built obviously a picture in everyone's mind um,
Right.
of what it was going to be. And then you get this version of Luke who is cut off from the Force, hates the Jedi, wants the Order to end. And people did not like it. Mark Hamill didn't like it, and I feel like that's where a lot of the stuff and a lot of the hate for this movie comes from. Um,
Fair enough.
And Luke ultimately does get redeemed in 9, and I think we mentioned this at the end of last week's episode with me and Taylor, and how when Luke became a Force ghost, he was able to see the error of his ways and turn from those, um, and realize there is ultimately value in the Jedi Order when done correctly, and that they were able to defeat the Emperor, and then Rey does. Um, there's of course the line of the weapon of the Jedi deserves more respect when he's saving the lightsaber from Rey throwing it in the fire after he
Hmm.
throws the lightsaber over the cliff. Um,
Right.
yeah. So
So
his character does get redeemed, but the way it starts is not how people envisioned. But go ahead with what you're gonna say.
I did find the Wayback Machine.
Okay.
I, I'm looking at it like the day before release, or at least attempting to. Um, let's see. I'm not finding the actual rating of it on this day. Give me a second to go back and refresh it. So 2 weeks after release, it was at a 52.
Okay.
It was at a 56 the day after.
Okay.
So it's fallen significantly since then. I was just wrong about exactly what it was. Critically, it was a 93 on release. So
And
it's
it's in a
fallen.
91 now, so it fell a little bit, but
Yeah, it's not enough to really worry about. Um,
yeah.
I'm curious, how many reviews do they have now?
Um, for the critic, or for the tomato meter, there's 487. For
Okay,
the audience score rating, there's over 100,000.
so in yeah, so it fell 14% in the audience score from 73,824 to whatever it is now. Interestingly enough, the critic score, there have been an additional 202 reviews and it's only fallen 2%. So critics are still liking the movie,
Mhm. Yeah.
meaning that somewhere in there are about 50,000 reviews, I would say, that are fake for the audience. Just a rough
There
estimate.
I think that's fair, but you've also gotta say if it started at 56 and ended up at 42, yes, that's lower. But let's just say the number's 56. That's still awful. That's
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 in
still not good.
that's an exact split. That's what
It
I'm
is,
that's my
but it's
point.
still
It's
not
split.
good.
It's not good. It's not universally acclaimed, but it's an exact split. So it's a 50-50.
It's hardly more of a split than 42 is. It's just split the other way.
Now, out of fairness, I'm going to look up the rise of Skywalkers as we're doing this.
So Rise of Skywalker is at a 52% tomato meter and an 86 audience score
Right. I'm looking
as
up
of now.
history. Um,
Yeah.
that
While
was
he's
interesting.
doing that, the other controversy in this movie is Finn and his character. And Grant alluded to it earlier, where Finn is clearly set up to be force sensitive at the end of 7. I mean, he's able to use a lightsaber effectively against Kylo Ren, and that's something that a normal person should absolutely not be able to do. Um, but he is, and so then you go, okay, we've got this guy, we've got Finn. He's clearly set up to go somewhere, right?
He was. He
Nope.
was set up to do
Set up with
nothing for
Rose.
3 movies. Yeah, he was set up with Rose.
Was set up with Rose to go on an adventure to a casino that is ultimately and like utterly meaningless because they go to the casino to go try to get a master code breaker to go break in and try to I can't remember exactly what they were trying to do.
They were getting some sort of key.
Yeah, they were trying to get some sort of key or something to let me look this up because I don't want to sound stupid. But
Well,
yeah, so essentially all that ends up happening is that Phasma dies. Um, they wanted to find the Master Codebreaker to help them infiltrate the Supremacy and save the Resistance fleet.
yeah. How many, out of curiosity,
Um,
how many reviews are there on the current Rise of Skywalker page?
50,000 plus is what it says.
Okay, so let's think about this. The Rise of Skywalker has a quarter of the reviews of The Last Jedi.
A quarter? How much does Last Jedi have?
Over 200,000.
Is it over 2?
It's over 2.
Okay.
So it has a quarter of those reviews.
Yes. Could I make an argument?
Sure.
The fact that it has so many less is because less people felt like they had the need potentially to go in and say they disliked it because they saw the score and went, okay, that's fair. Versus people going, I think this is awful and wanting to voice that opinion.
That's possible, but you know as well as I do, there like Star Wars fans are going to voice their opinion regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So my theory on it is, en masse they bombed Jedi. That's just my theory.
I mean,
Because
they did, but again, they were at 56% and dropped to 42. Yes, that's a 14% drop, but it still is a split fan base regardless. It's either 56-44 or 42-58.
now I want to point out the closest I could find was 2 days after for each of them.
Mm-hmm.
At 2 days after, The Last Jedi had 4 times as many reviews.
Okay. What was the percentage on Rise of Skywalker 2 days after?
It was 86. It hasn't moved.
So it stayed consistent then.
Right. Whereas the other has continued to fall.
Mm-hmm.
So my theory is that it got bombed.
Yes, but bombed from already being hated versus being liked by the general fan base.
We don't know how early it was bombed, is what I'm saying. I don't know that. It's not 2017. I can't tell you when it happened. I can look up I can see if I can find an article. Anyway, I'm just gonna see. The Last Jedi was being review bombed the day after release. It was being bombed the day after release. It was organized on 4chan. There was a Facebook group called Down with Disney's Treatment of Franchises and its Fanboys. And it had just like it got tanked. Audiences was at 56, which was an actual planned thing. It was was actively bombed before then.
So can I say something about that though? The fact that it was bombed and people hated it that much that they intentionally bombed it means that fans hated it. And you
Cinema
could say it was a
Score.
small group of people, but people don't do that unless it's hardcore Star Wars fans who genuinely feel disrespected by the story Disney went with and dislike it that much that they organize bombings of the ratings of this.
That's 100% possible, yes. But just to be fair, the Cinema Score on Last Jedi was an A. That's an exit poll of people leaving theaters. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The Cinema Score on Rise was a B plus. Wait, let me double check that. Let me find it. It was a. Gosh, I cannot find it. It had the lowest cinema scores of all of them at a. I cannot for the life of me find it. Rise of Skywalker had a B plus. It was the lowest of all of them. On
Yes,
the exit,
the B plus checks with the 86% audience score.
it does. But Last Jedi had an A. This is entirely without the review bombing. This is exit polling day it came out.
Mm-hmm.
So fans are there the day it comes out.
Yeah.
So this is exit polling.
Mm-hmm. I would also say though, online at least the general reaction I saw was negative. I don't remember a positive reaction online. Apart, like not even talking about people trying to bomb the ratings, but everyone's reaction I remember seeing was negative, not positive.
I remember reading articles about it being mixed. Our friend Ethan actually really likes Last Jedi and really hated Rise of Skywalker. I was sort of nonplussed on both, but I recognize that The Last Jedi is a vastly superior movie. I just didn't like some of the choices.
Last Jedi or
The Last Jedi? The Last Jedi is vastly superior.
this is you, and we'll get into this because this is you talking about as I don't like the way you word it because it's hard to word. I know what you're trying to say. He's
So
talking about as go ahead and say it how you would.
the way I come about it, it is a better movie. As an individual standalone film, it makes it works better.
He yeah,
It is more interesting, it's shot better, it's a lot prettier, and just in my opinion. And then it also does, like, the characters are interesting. Luke Skywalker of episode 8. So if we make that his own character, Luke Skywalker of episode 8 is a good character. He is a really good character. He is just a really terrible Luke Skywalker.
mhm.
And it is a really not great Star Wars movie, but it is a really good movie in and of Star Wars. And I saw the audience dip as I said that. So thank
Yeah.
you for staying with me.
And so my counter to that, and I'll be honest, as I was watching it, I feel less strongly about my dislike of The Last Jedi, but I get that, and it's kind of what the audience score versus the like tomato meter again, bombing aside, whatnot. It shows that critics like the movie. They like how it's shot. They like everything. Like it's a beautiful movie
Yeah.
to watch. It absolutely is, and it has like good story elements to it. Um, Again, I still feel like the whole Finn thing is wasted, but it's hard for me to go. This is the best movie if you take it out of Star Wars, because I can't do that personally because it is a Star Wars movie and it fits within a again like unplanned story, but it's still within that story.
Right.
And
I
so
get that.
I can't make that same connection that you can. I understand what you see in it to do that more now, but I still can't make that connection.
And I get that. But even aside from that, it is a better single movie story than the Rise of Skywalker is a 9 movie finisher. Like Rise of Skywalker isn't a great single movie story. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's overlong, and they kind of spend the whole time doing nothing. But even if you
You could
count
argue
it
the
as
same
a
thing about The Last Jedi with Finn and Rose, though. That's a lot of the story doing what ends up being nothing.
yeah, you're right. It is, but it's not. It isn't wasted because you have to have Finn. Whereas the entire subplot of 9 just it goes to waste. Where they're like trying to locate the Sith planet, it just doesn't. It's a pointless side quest.
It's not a pointless side quest because that's the main quest because they have to figure out where Palpatine is to go kill him and before the final order can take off and go destroy the galaxy and rule
But
it.
can we not just follow the guys that are going there?
The one person who went there was Kylo because he had the Sith Wayfinder, and they had to find the Sith Wayfinder themselves to get there. The other one is on Kylo's ship, so they have to track down the other one. So that's what the story is of they find the dagger and C3PO can read it, but because of whatever because of the Sokovia Accords, um, because of whatever thing they passed, he wasn't able to translate the Sith language. So then they had to go, like, essentially, like, delete him to get into his brain to get the location out of it.
Right. But I'm just going to throw this out. What do
Yes,
we learn that is exclusive to episode 9? What do we learn, Grant?
you learn a lot.
We learn about a force dyad.
Yes,
A force dyad that allows Rey to see wherever the heck Kylo is. Allows Rey to heal Kylo. There's a bond there.
yes.
And so the only person that is going to, is it Dathomir? Am I correct on that? It's not Dathomir. What's the planet?
Exegol.
Exegol. The only person that's going to Exegol is the
Mhm.
person we know how to find.
She can see where he is, but just because she would potentially be able to see that he's on Exegol doesn't mean she would immediately know how to get there.
But she can feel where he is in like space as well. Like it was 8 or 9 where she felt the tug and was able to find Kylo because of it.
What?
I
Which
know for a
part?
fact one of the three movies, it's been a minute, forgive me. One of the three movies, like she found him, like physically located him based on this force pull.
There were
Was
multiple times that he found her based off of it. He
okay.
found her at the festival because he pulled the beads off of her. And then he figured out she was in his room because they were fighting and they destroyed the stand that the Vader helmet was sitting on. And the Vader helmet fell through to where he was, and he was able to figure out where she was. I don't remember the only time I
Well,
remember, like,
maybe I've got it backwards. Regardless, we know people can like physically interact with objects through this thing.
yeah, but they hadn't gotten to the point it was at will. It was seemingly random when it would happen. It wasn't like they went up. Let me go talk to Ben Solo real quick. Um, it just happened at sometimes inconvenient times.
Fair enough. I just it to me it just felt forced. It felt as forced as having Billy D. Williams come back for this stupid movie. Like, there's no point.
It's
There's
cool
less
though.
than no
Like,
point.
why not bring him back? What's wrong with him?
You just threw him in there. Like
He
the
he comes in and he's able to be a link between. They get the word out to him that they've got Exegol and they can get there, and he's able to be a link to the rest of the galaxy to come help.
and what's Leia doing?
She's
Because
dead
she
currently.
wasn't dead at the time.
Yeah, she was. She dies before that.
Okay, never mind.
Um, Rey and Kylo were fighting on the ruins of the Death Star, and then Leia reaches out the last time to say Ben, and then dies. And then Rey stabs him, and then heals him, and then takes a ship and flies off. He talks to the memory of his dad, and then takes off, and then eventually the rest of the people show up. But Leia's dead at this point. Leia's dead before the rest of the resistance or the rebels start flying to Exegol.
Right, but we've already met Billy D at this point. We met him
Mm-hmm.
on a desert planet when
Mm-hmm.
she was still alive.
Yes.
So why couldn't she have like contacted him, or like why? My point being, why couldn't she have sent out the word that we were going to need the whole galaxy?
To go to Exegol?
Right. I mean,
Because she was dead at that point. Because
at the
first they
point they
had to
was
find a way there.
right, but why couldn't she have had the armada at the ready? Why did Billy D have to be the guy bringing the cavalry? Forget that it's cool for a second, because it is.
Well,
But like they
if you go
drug him
back to
into it.
8, if you go back to 8, they send out a message to the galaxy and they don't get an answer. Leia sends a message out. She says, "Use my personal code." Sends the message out and no one comes.
Okay.
So Leia tried already and it didn't work.
Okay. I mean, if that's you're right. I had forgotten about that. So fair enough. That's why they drug Billy D into it. But like it just bothers me because they killed off all the legacy characters, and they had them in each movie until they were killed off.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just bring Billy D and Palpatine back in the last one. They're like, "Hey guys, you want to die too?" And Billy D said
Billy stays
no.
alive, but Palpatine
That's right.
dies.
Right.
Rip my boy.
So it just feels anachronistic, is where I'm going with that. That's my whole point. It doesn't feel like it connects to the other two. 8 feels like it connected to 7, even though it changed some of the stuff 7 set up. 9 just feels like you threw it in there, which is fine if you're going to make 10, but they didn't make 10. So
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, and this gets into the debate on 9 because Grant's argument is 9 isn't a good closing for the trilogy because it doesn't fit with the others. Like you just said.
It's anachronistic. It's the ending of it. So if episode 7 is episode 4, then episode 8 is episode 6 because we kill off the Emperor having the Darth Vader turn on him, right? The apprentice kills the master. That's episode 6.
Mm.
Episode 9 is also episode 6.
Yes.
Like
with the Emperor back.
Literally. So not only did they undo the cool thing about Kylo having killed Snoke, because Snoke was a clone, a failed clone of Palpatine. Kylo killed Palpatine twice.
Yep, I want to throw this in here because I edited this together, and I've been patient 35 minutes waiting to play it. So here we go.
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
Look at that stud. Look at him.
Yeah. I mean,
who doesn't want to be his granddaughter?
He was the only good part of 9, in my humble opinion.
Like, I agree. It was dumb to bring him back. I really think they should have kept him dead. But I also like that he's back in a sense. Like, I like the character. It's cool. It's cool to think back and go, even if they had no idea, even if we had no idea, he was still pulling the strings all along. When I say they had no idea, I meant Disney.
I'm gonna share this because I think he's right. He is right. 9 feels more like a sequel to 7 and is trying to fix a lot of the changes 8 made. This is my whole point.
Yeah,
so it is a setup movie.
Yeah, so what you end up with in here, let me say this real quick because I think you would agree. We've talked about this before. Where you end up is you either like 8 and don't like 9, or you don't like 8 and then you like 9. Like, because if you like 8 and what they did, then you're mad at 9 because it feels like they go back and, as he said, they're trying to fix and change what 8 does. But if you like 8, then you go, why are they changing this story? And so then you don't like 9.
Well, the problem with it is it changes the story and doesn't finish anything. It finishes a story it created.
Yes.
So
it does finish it. It does do something.
There are 2 other movies that aren't wrapped up at all. Because this movie is entirely self-contained. So the other 2 are pointless.
It's not entirely self-contained because you can't just drop us into 9 without seeing at least 7 or 8 even. More so 7. You can't just hop in and know who the different characters are.
You're right.
Because you don't get any explanation.
Ben was the only one. Ben is the only character that it matters that his parents were Han and Leia. That's it. The rest of them, it's either Frey, for example. We don't know who she is until this movie.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know who Finn is. Finn doesn't matter. Poe Dameron could just be a pilot that makes it. Great.
So can I make an argument then? Another thing 9 closes from 7 and 8 is who Rey is, where she comes from, who's her family, why was she left on Jakku, what happened to her parents. We get those answers. We find out that her dad, I think we end up finding out her dad is like a non-force sensitive clone of Palpatine.
That still doesn't argue for the existence of 7 and 8.
Oh, but
it answers
closing
that one question.
Yes, it closes a loop. You're saying it doesn't close stuff. It closes that. You get the conclusion of Ben's arc. We talked about this earlier.
You do get the conclusion of Ben's arc, but you don't get the conclusion of Ben's arc because Ben's arc has been concluded twice now. It ended in 8 and then went on. So he redeemed himself by killing the Emperor. And then he decided to lead the First Order. And then he redeemed himself by killing the Emperor and then died.
Hold on. No. So in 8, he doesn't leave the First Order. He kills Snoke and then takes over the First
Lead.
Oh, I said leave. Sorry.
Yeah. No. And then decides to lead the First Order. And then he redeems himself again and dies.
Yeah, so in 8, when we talked about this earlier, in 8, what he's doing is continuing on the Sith tradition of the Sith apprentice kills the master. So that's just a continuation of his story. That would be like saying Palpatine's story concludes when he kills Plagueis, which I think happens somewhere in 1. We don't see it, obviously, but I think that's around the time it happens, is either in 1 or between 1 and 2. Palpatine does that, and that's a continuation of his story and evolution of the character. That's been furthering himself into the dark side at that point. So then it's set up he's going to be the big bad. Then you get the reveal of Palpatine, good or not, whatever you want to call it, you get that.
But Grant, what didn't happen there
Mm-hmm.
is Palpatine didn't kill Plagueis, and then Plagueis come back.
Oh no, I agree. It's weird.
Over.
So it's certainly weird, but you were arguing we don't get a conclusion to it, but we do.
We don't.
It's just
we get two that contradict each other. Because he had the redemption moment. He had the Vader moment when he killed the Emperor. He had that same exact thing.
When he kills Snoke?
Right. The Emperor. However, for the
Supreme
purposes
leader.
of archetypes, Vader is Kylo and the Emperor is Snoke. So we had that moment. And the difference, the interesting thing about that is instead of deciding he was a good guy, he continued on the Sith tradition. So he made the decision after having already continued the tradition to continue the tradition and become a Sith Lord. And then somebody gets in his way and he decides to become the good guy and team up with the Jedi to kill off Palpatine and then die. So either A, you believe that he was committed to furthering the Sith tradition after having the chance to redeem himself twice. Or B, you just believe that he failed miserably the second time.
I would say, in a sense, it's similar to Anakin, where, although more so, where you get the sense Ben felt trapped. Like he felt he was trapped within the dark side. So then he kills Snoke, and then at that point, like with Rey, when Rey's trying to redeem him, he feels trapped, and like his only option is, Rey, join me, like give in to the dark side, and let's rule the galaxy together. That's the impression I got, at least. And that's even something that they've talked about, is he felt trapped by it. And then eventually he's able to break free of that. So in a sense, he's a victim, even though it's one that for a while he's continuing to give into it.
Well, if he's a victim, then why is he the villain?
Because he's still bad. Like, even if he's trapped in it, like Vader gets coerced into it by Palpatine. Palpatine saying we can save Padme, which, by the way, he ends up saying, I don't actually know how to do that yet, but we'll figure it out. And then at that point, Vader gets sliced and diced by Obi-Wan, and then he's trapped in the dark side in his suit, relying on the dark side to stay alive.
Right. So Vader fell and then was redeemed. Kylo was evil. Now we do see that he has fallen in The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
We see
he
that.
fell, and then he gets redeemed.
Well, he fell, and then he could have been redeemed, but chose to double down.
There were also times Vader could have been redeemed. Luke was trying to redeem Vader earlier than he ended up getting redeemed.
The difference is Vader didn't give himself a hard out. But as soon as Vader got the opportunity, assuming they both felt trapped, as soon as Vader got the opportunity, he was done. Kylo got the opportunity twice in 2 consecutive movies and made 2 different decisions.
I mean, Vader also could have left earlier. Like, he could have. He had the opportunity. He and Luke were together and could have, like, just ran off. Yeah. But there's a good amount of parallels between Kylo and Vader, even if there were differences and some of the nuances. I get what you're saying, but he still falls to the dark side. He still pushes himself further into it, and then ultimately gets redeemed.
Yeah, the difference, I guess, in this is that if you're going by that, you don't see any sort of arc. It means you can cut out any of the 3 movies and it's the same. There is no arc. You don't see him redeem himself after having fallen. You just see him like sitting there, well, maybe I shouldn't be a bad guy. Maybe I'm the victim. And then finally being set free of the victimhood. We conclude it so many times that it makes at least one of the movies, if not both of the first 2, unnecessary. Like, entirely. Like, could skip it, watch 9, and be fine.
I mean, I feel like you could skip 8, but I feel like 9, I think we both agree, at least mostly, I feel like 7 you would have to watch if you're going to watch either 8 or 9. Especially 8. Like, if you're going to watch 8, you have to watch 7 because it leads directly into it. 7, I would argue with 9 even, Like, if you skip from 7 to 9, you're like, okay, Snoke's dead, Palpatine's here,
They explain.
Finn, Finn is Finn, Poe is still Poe. Although you missed some of the character development in there for Poe as him as a leader that happens in 8.
But
But
it's not necessary.
yeah.
Because the thing is, the character development of him as a leader was entirely self-contained in 8. We thought he was fine in 7. And then we saw he wasn't in 8. And then he grew and became better in 9.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go from 7 to 9, he's just fine the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So at the very least, it cuts out 8.
Mm-hmm.
My argument is, if you go into 9 knowing that Han and Leia are Ben's parents, you're good. You can go from 6 to 9 and have no issues as long as you know that one piece of information.
Maybe.
I wouldn't. I just would go to 7 and assume that everything goes happy ever after, or go to 7 and watch 8, or go to 7 and watch 9. It's a choose your own adventure. It forks.
Mm-hmm.
Which just means, to the point I was making earlier, if you were gonna go the Last Jedi, or if you were gonna go the Rise of Skywalker route, there needed to be one more movie.
I don't know. I still disagree with that, because you get the conclusion to a lot of stuff. And I mean, some stuff has to be left open to tell future stories. But like I was saying earlier, I think 9 ends and sets it up for further in the future. So we were talking about this 7 straight into 8. That's like back to back. What Brett was talking about, 5 days. Rey downloads the Force from Kylo and does her thing. But that is the actual explanation. So the explanation is that the Force dyad, they're essentially one in the Force, and so as that grows, Rey becomes more powerful because she is essentially able to use the learning, like the teaching that Kylo had.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely retconning an awfully written character.
Oh, no.
But
this entire trilogy only works if you retcon all of it. Like, if you go on and explain what happened afterwards, because the movies don't do that. I also want to point out, and this is just the last thing I'm going to say about it, they are making more movies now, but at time of release, up until 2 weeks ago, this was the end of this timeline. That was how it was marketed. That's how I went into watching it both times I've seen it. This is the end. We'll tell stories that happen in between, but after that, we're moving on. So you didn't have to leave it open to tell future stories, because the entire point of it was it closed 9 movies, 2 other movies, and a couple of TV shows.
Yeah.
And instead, they just didn't wrap up they didn't wrap up 7 and 8. It was a okay enough cash grab to bring the Emperor back after 6. That's fine. Sure. He's back. We kill him. That's 7. Or maybe 8 if you go with the actual 7. But it doesn't conclude its own trilogy, much less 9 movies. It concludes 7.
I think you're putting too much emphasis on the Emperor, because if you take it out, there's a lot of other stuff that gets wrapped up. You get Ben's story wrapped up. You find out about Rey and her backstory. Luke, Leia, and Han, they're gone. Their stories are done. You get Finn and Poe's character arcs of, should Finn's have been better? Yes, but you still get their character arcs of, now they're the 2 in charge of the rebels. And how is that like? And like I was saying, you could potentially set up in the future. And I know you're talking about the conclusion, but it concludes it by having that arc, but also then leaving open the potential for future stuff if they were to come back and do it.
But if you're going,
and you get the conclusion of how it's used.
Because I haven't seen it since they announced that there were 2 more movies. You have, I'll let you have it. But the way I watched it both times was the way it was marketed, the end of a timeline. So they set up a 10th movie that we were never going to get. Even now, I think the 10th movie is going to be set 30 years later, because Star Wars has a problem of just going in order. They have to nail themselves to a wall 30 years down the line and then go back and figure out what happened. it just, even taking the Palpatine stuff out, Ben's arc gets wrapped up, but in order to wrap it up, they had to kill it. They had to undo most of the arc.
I mean, they didn't have to kill him. Like, his arc was completed when he was redeemed because, I mean, they had been talking about it the whole time. There's still some light in him. And I mean, Luke did the same thing to Vader if you want to go there and make that comparison.
I said kill it, the arc, meaning the arc. Yeah, they didn't have to kill him, but in order to tie up the arc, they had to undo a third of it.
What did they have to undo?
They had to undo his turn and doubling down. We never see him lead the First Order. They just killed that, just fast forwarded a year. Oh, he's ready to turn again. So we never see him become the villain to then become the hero. He's just kind of conflicted the whole time.
Well, he's not the main villain, but he's the second main villain the whole time at the very least. And at the end of 8, he is the main villain. When they're fighting on Crate, he is the guy in charge. He's the supreme leader. He is the one ordering them to fire on Luke 100,000 times, and he's still there. He goes down to fight him. Like, he is the villain. He is a villain, and then he is the villain at the end of 8, and then Palpatine comes back.
But he
and
was
is the
conflicted.
main villain there. But
he was conflicted for 7 and 8.
Mm-hmm.
And then he
That doesn't mean he's not a villain, though.
But he's viewed as the protagonist, especially in 8, right? In 8, we're thinking it's either Rey's going to fall or he's going to be redeemed.
Mm-hmm.
So he's conflicted, and then he decides to just keep going with being a Sith. You're right. For 30 seconds, we see him fight a dude. And then we never see that choice matter. The rebels escape. Everybody lives to fight another day. We never see him hunting anybody down. We never see any sort of meaningful battle with him as the main villain. He's always just conflicted until finally he decides he's a good guy. So they set him up to be that villain. Finally, I made my decision. I'm going after it. And then they immediately undid that.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. They did do that, but in doing that, they brought Palpatine back. Like, I get what you're saying, but we still do get the conclusion of his arc because he is bad, doubles down on it, doesn't become the main villain because Palpatine's there, but is still like a villain. For all intents and purposes, he is the villain because he's the one they're always interacting with. Like, Rey is the only one of the Resistance that sees Snoke. Like, and then Ben kills him. But Ben is the one that they're always interacting with. Even when it's Palpatine, most of the time it's still Ben until they get to Exegol and then see him.
But the whole point of the villain was not to defeat him. It was to save him. That was what Leia wanted. That was why Rey revived him. That's not a villain. That's a prodigal son.
But it is a villain, though.
But he never acted like a villain. He killed Han Solo. That's it.
He killed Han. He killed a lot of other people. He was... I disagree with you.
Okay. And that's fine.
Yeah. And then we end with not this, but should have been basically this. This is how... Do it.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah. That's better than the original. Yeah.
We end with what was actually a fairly crappy ending.
Oh yeah.
Rey Skywalker, everybody.
The very, very end, yes, but I think I back to what we were saying that real quick. I do think it wraps up. Like, even though Ben isn't the main guy, you still get the wrap up of his arc, whether it ends how we thought it would or not. Palpatine, you still get the end of his and the other stuff I mentioned. But
yeah, you're right.
We've rambled on about that enough, I would say.
I want to say you are right. We do get an ending. It's just not satisfying for the other two movies.
I get what you're saying. Again, I kind of disagree. I get what you're going for, but I also kind of disagree.
Okay, that's fine. That's why we do this, so I can hatefully disagree with you.
Yes.
So screw you. I'll see you tomorrow.
So we end where we started. The Star Wars sequel trilogy having no plan is somehow worse than having a bad one.
Yep.
Because it's not a coherent story. It's just not. Like pick your side, pick your poison. We can agree it's not coherent. We can agree it gets wrapped up in some manner. Almost everyone can agree seven's decent.
So either way you watch it, because if you view it as a V, I think they both work better. So if the Star Wars continuity is one line until you get to 7, and it's 7, and at 7 it branches into 8 and 9 that way, and then you watch 8.
We'll use this. This is 7, and like this is 8, and this is 9.
Yep. And
Branching off of
if
it.
you watch 8, there's more to tell, but it's an ending.
Yeah.
And if you watch 9, there's more to tell, but it's an ending. Whereas if you watch 8 and then 9, you've watched 2 different endings. They're 2 different film series. It looks like the freaking X-Men timeline, where it's like every one of them wraps into a different set of movies, but also the same set of movies. Like it's just literally a choose your own adventure. If you want to see Kylo become a villain, watch 8 and pray that they remake 9. If you want to see Palpatine back and Kylo redeemed, watch 9 and pray they remake 8. That's how it is.
Yeah.
It sucks because it shouldn't have been, but that's how it is. If you view it that way, they're actually okay. But you just have
and also, and I know we're about an hour into this and no one's here, especially just in the recording at this point. But The Mandalorian's helped a little bit in seeing some of the backstory. You've seen a little bit of Luke. You're seeing the beginning of him training other people to become Jedi, and you can see the Luke we all expected to see. So then you go, okay, he was this Luke at some point. And then you see the fall, and so that helps it a little bit. But I think still just that initial reaction from the fans is going to have a prequel like view, at least in that aspect, where it's going to change a lot over time. I feel like once we get more backstory and fill in, it'll change how people view it.
Personally, my opinion about 9 changes if they make a TV show or something about the time between 8 and 9. If you make that and we see Kylo become a villain that is saved, I'm happy. Star Wars problems are solved with more Star Wars.
Yeah, I just want to throw this one back in here too.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Bruh. If you literally explain that and make Kylo a villain for any period of time past an hour, like have him rule the galaxy and then decide to be a good guy, then your timeline relinearizes. That's a new word. But it becomes a line again. Otherwise, it's choose your own adventure. There needs to be something in between those two in order for them to connect and make a trilogy. Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Thanks for bringing up your point. That kind of cleared up my thoughts on it. So, an hour into this crap show,
we should probably start wrapping this up.
We probably should. It's been a lot of fun.
Go into our criteria, or
yeah, sure. We can discuss it.
All right. Did this series set out to do what it set out to do? I can't speak.
Not as a trilogy.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Even if you take out a movie, it didn't, because it set out to be a trilogy and it isn't. It's two dyads. It's a dyad.
Can I make an argument?
Yes.
It did what it set out to do because it set out to tell a trilogy without a plan.
It's set out to throw darts at a wall. It was the way the DC did it. It was constant bait and switch because they were constantly listening to a group of fans. Like they had to pick it because the first one was good. Then they split it, and then they had to pick a group.
Yeah,
that's how it works, and it sucks. This is why the studios need to get out of filmmaking.
What are our other criterias?
Pass or fail was the other big one. There were 2 more. Is it rewatchable? Is it? They're Star Wars movies. You have to rewatch them at this point because they're going to make another one. Thank goodness, because maybe they can fix them.
I would say these are rewatchable.
They
would.
hurt, but yes,
Yes.
you have to hold your
Pass or
nose and
fail's
close
a
your eyes.
really interesting one here.
It failed.
Um,
In my opinion, it was a miserable fail because no matter how you look at it, they did not succeed at making a trilogy that holds up as a trilogy and concludes the ending as it was supposed to of the entire 9 movies. It just didn't.
yeah.
And even they admit it fails because they're making more.
Yeah. There's hear me out here. There's part of me that wants to give it a pass, and let me explain why.
Okay.
Because no matter how you view it, people are gonna like 2 of the 3 movies. They're either gonna like 7 and 8 or they're gonna like 7 and 9, which means they're gonna like a majority of the 3 movies, which means it's got a 67%, which is in theory a pass. Barely, but in theory.
Yeah. Though I will say there are a lot of people in my boat where Last Jedi was a good movie. It was not a great Star Wars movie. And I didn't particularly like either one of them, like in terms of Star Wars story. Like I enjoyed Last Jedi, but I didn't like the direction it was going as
You
much.
enjoy the actual like quality of the filming of The Last Jedi.
And I like some of the plot points and some of the ideas. I didn't like where it was taking some of the characters I liked from before.
Yeah. There's definitely some really good things it does. Like I like how Holdo kind of gets redeemed at the end with going to vroom vroom through the ship. That's pretty cool because it gets set up like this girl has no idea what she's doing, but she actually had a plan. She just didn't want to tell Poe because Poe's an idiot. Um,
Well, which is the thing we found out in that movie.
yeah.
That's the thing. It mischaracterized Poe. It mischaracterized a movie or a character we'd only known
Did it
for a minute.
mischaracterize Poe? Because Poe's kind of like Han. And
Poe's-
Leia's like, I like this guy. And so does Holdo. She's like, yeah, I like him.
I mean, Poe is literally Han. The problem
Yeah.
is Poe is Han with anger issues now.
Mhm.
Which I mean, you got to set up something, or he's boring. It's just weird. Like, yeah. And see, I get why you would think it passes, but I'm gonna throw this out.
I'm saying you can make it. I don't know if I want to say it passes. I'm saying you might be able to make an argument for it.
Okay. So let's throw this in though. If you made Harry Potter,
Mm-hmm.
because it's close in length, if you made 7 movies of Harry Potter,
Mm-hmm.
and then in the last movie, you decided that Voldemort was not only not the villain of this entire saga, he was the hero, and Neville was the villain. And then the series ends.
That's not a fair argument though.
It's similar.
It's not similar. It'd be like if Voldemort dies in episode 3, and then let's say I don't know, let's throw a name out there. Lucius Malfoy becomes the bad guy, and you're like, he's the guy controlling everything. And then you find out in 7 and 8 that oh hey, Voldemort's really been controlling stuff behind the scenes. He's the big bad.
Or maybe even better than that. It's if Voldemort dies in 6 in Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 7, Malfoy is set up, doesn't become the villain, but is set up to become the villain. And then in 9, Grindelwald in. And that's it. That's the end of it. Nobody gets anything. It's that same idea. It's like nobody gets to
Someone
be
tell me
happy.
this guy doesn't understand Harry Potter. Just play this clip.
No, I understand Grindelwald was like hundreds of years before. My point is, it's that out of left field.
It's not that out of left field. It'd be like if Voldemort died and then came back. It'd be like if Voldemort had a resurrection stone like Harry did, and he's like,
Grant, I just want to play the clip. The line to explain it. This is how out of left field it is. The line to explain it.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Okay, can I say something? Can I say something about this? And Taylor said something about this last week. How would they have known how Palpatine returned?
Well, how do we know how Palpatine returned?
We don't at that point.
No.
At that point, we didn't. We know now it was cloning and witch magic and whatever else, whatever the crap you want to say. But how would Poe have known how Palpatine returned?
He doesn't have to know how Palpatine returned. It just has to be explained. That's the explanation. And then they go on to say, well, it was cloning. It's a MacGuffin. He's just there because he's there. They decided, you know what? Palpatine's back. How? Somehow. Well, how?
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
Yeah, it's a good conclusion to that. Anyway, like it would, I'll be honest with you, I'd like it a lot more if there was a flashback to that exact cut. Like exactly that, it'd have been a lot better. Instead, it's just there. He's just back somehow.
Yeah.
Somehow the Joker's out of Arkham again. How? How'd he break out? Somehow.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think it's time that we wrap it
because
up.
I've started repeating myself.
I have to. It's
That's
not.
what she said.
Yeah, that was supposed to be that's good to me.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for watching. If you'd like to support us, if you're here at this point, you're a saint for getting through this discussion.
Yes, you are.
But if you're here, there's a Patreon. It's patreon.com/theculturenerd. You can support us. You can support the network as a whole. Please do. It would be nice. Flip-flopped here. I've been your host today, Grant Skillen.
And I've been your rambling co-host, Grant Ingram. And thank you to all of our Patreon supporters and to Jose for the logo and Taylor for the intro.
Apparently now it's nobody for the intro.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for joining us. On the left side, I believe, is the link. Is that to the playlist of all of our
It's
videos?
The one on the left is The Cultured Nerd.
Okay. And then the one on the right is to our other show, whereas we're in the Hat for Much Talk About Nothing. Go check it out. If you're somehow still here, go check out our previous videos on this. We've got Grant getting roasted by a guy named Brett for about an hour straight on this. So please go check it out. But even if you don't, still glad you've been here and thank you for joining.
Yeah. See you next week.